There's this dream we all have, a dream I share, revealing the cloven hoof. Now, people use different expressions. They talk about the smoking gun, the one incriminating, irrefutable detail that gives you the key to everything. As these interviews continued, I became convinced that this movie was about the absence of something, not its presence. I hate to quote Hannah Arendt because it's become too goddamn fashionable. I would have arguments with a friend of mine, Ron Rosenbaum, about the famous phrase, the banality of evil. And of course she defined it and redefined it and redefined it again. But there's one definition that I rather like, and it's not in Eichmann in Jerusalem. It's in a letter to Gershom Scholem, where she defined it not as the presence of something, but as the absence of something. Something you would expect to be there, but just isn't.
Okay, first thing, I feel like we should say, once again, recording in a new place. And we're in the best place to record a podcast, which is directly above a pub that's about to show an England versus Scotland football match. So, if there's any noise, if you hear any people yelling or you hear any cars, because we're also by a busy street.
I thought you said we were going to put it on.
Oh, yeah. Can't be bothered.
I'll put it on in a bit.
Yeah, I'll put it on in a bit.
Maybe if we get this done, we'll be able to watch the second half.
Yeah. Has it started?
I think it starts at 8. Well, I mean, it's just for the listener. It's 7:49.
It's 7:49. Friday, June 18th. I just got a very funny text from my dad. Hello, Dan. How we doing? Boy, we'll get into this, but I'm a little angry. I'm a little off sorts.
Chuck's a little worked up.
A little worked up.
Yeah.
How are you?
I'm all right. Well, I suppose from the listener's standpoint, it's been a whole week.
Yeah, wow, it's been a week.
We recorded 2 days ago.
Yeah.
And therefore I have still yet to go away.
Yeah. How was your holiday?
I'm sure it was excellent.
Oh, great, thank God.
So my current experience of myself is all of that pre-going away stress.
Yeah, God, yeah.
That's what it is, isn't it? Yeah. It'll be all right. That's my general sentiment anyway.
Do you think communism will solve any of that anxiety? Because a lot of that anxiety for me is just the prospect of having to deal with traveling. And if it was free, it'd be a little bit better, I guess, and wouldn't have to deal with like TSA and like maybe not. Maybe it'd still just be stressful.
Yeah, maybe it'd just be stressful.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't have to solve everything, right? It doesn't have to solve everything.
It would be nice.
Yeah.
It'd be nice if it solved everything.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose what are the stresses? The experience of traveling, the experience of interacting with people, the various frustrations. I don't know.
Yeah.
We'll find out.
Yeah.
It's all a faff.
Yeah. I'll ask you again in 2 weeks.
All right. I'll give it some thought.
Yeah, exactly.
When I'm on my 7-hour train journey tomorrow, I'll be asking myself, how would this be improved by communism?
I guarantee you'll be thinking that when you're on at least one train, when they just extort you
Yeah.
to get to London.
When I'm on my bus replacement service,
Yeah.
I'm thinking about it.
Under communism, it'll just be one big hyperloop. We'll have figured it out. It's funny when Musk first came up with that idea. I don't remember if it was the hyperloop or if it was just like the bullet train in California. But everyone was like, "This would be pretty cool to like get to Bakersfield in like 5 minutes, I guess." But then you just kind of think it's like, I feel like I'd rather just spend the extra hour on a train and not be like packed in a tube, lying down, being like sucked through space and time. Like, I don't know, it feels a little.
I think you're
like,
imagining the hyperloop to be like those people in tubes in Futurama.
That's kind of, yeah, exactly, like a pneumatic tube.
I thought it was just a train.
I mean, if it's just a train, I'm going to be much more mad than I am
It's
right
just
now.
a train, but like a vacuum train. So I guess less friction.
I'd like to get to the point where I can just show up to work and be like, vacuum train. And they just throw money at me.
Yeah, I think you just have to be a different person.
Yeah, I don't think
And
I'd be Elon Musk.
you have to have had a large family fortune in which to invest in a tech firm early on in your life.
I thought he did that all himself. What are you gonna do? Yeah. Who are we rooting for today, by the way, in this football match? England or Scotland?
I mean, I have no particular connection to Scotland.
Oh, yeah, sure.
So, I mean, one always root against the English, I guess. I mean, like I've decided not to fight against the urge to just support England. I could work on a rationale and justification for that, or I could just be like, I don't know, it's a sporting competition. You've got to have a team, and it is also nice to be surrounded by people who are in all likelihood supporting the same team. You know, like there is like I don't know. It's unfortunate that one would hope friendly but often hostile sense of collective solidarity has to be fashioned around a national identity.
Yeah.
But it's I mean, 3 years ago when it was the World Cup, it was quite a nice vibe to be around. People's sort of like collective attachment and joy to just the experience of supporting a team and being together and sharing those highs and lows. And I mean, it's not new. Football fans knew this, and sports fans in general know this. I don't know.
Yeah.
So if anybody is enjoying supporting England, don't feel bad about it.
Yeah, go for it. That's what I say. Yeah.
I do find it a bit strange, though. This time in particular, this international tournament in particular, seeing people flying England flags.
Yeah, it's not that
and
today.
it's not necessarily the flag per se, although I mean, obviously, I do have a particular gut reaction to seeing that flag and I guess the Union flag as well. But I was just like, who are you showing off to?
Yeah.
Like who are you trying to tell that you're supporting England? I think it's presumably assumed. I mean, if you were a Scot living in England, by all means, like, fly the flag.
Yeah. I don't know how I feel about it. Until friend of the show, Thelma Walker forms her breakaway state in the north of England, then that's who we'll be rooting for.
Yeah, of course.
Presumably there's some Northerners on the team. So yeah, for now, England,
Yeah.
why not? That's what I say.
Yeah, it's interesting. I never really thought about that. It would necessitate a new sports team.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay.
I hope it would be good. I don't know. Who's the good... I don't even know if I'm going to bother asking this question, but who's the good...
I can't give you any answers.
It's Harry something. Harry Kane, is that his name?
Right. Yeah.
I hope it's his name.
Yeah.
Folks, I like baseball. This whole football thing. I'm still calling it soccer, you know what I mean?
I don't mind calling it soccer as well.
Yeah.
We could adopt that as the podcast's preferred nomenclature if you like.
Excellent. Thank
Okay.
you. From this day forward. So they're doing American football downstairs. People St. George's flags flying around, soccer, all of that jazz. That's all out of the way. It's raining again, so that's how you know we're in England. After being very hot, Dan and I spent the last week being eaten alive by mosquitoes, which I was told when I first got here that mosquitoes don't live in England, and that's been proven dramatically incorrect this past week. My legs look like I have chicken pox. I was trying to think of a better metaphor. I don't know. Yeah, so mosquitoes too, as well. But hopefully the rain will deal with them. I don't know. Anything else? Is that enough banner?
I don't know.
Have we reached a requisite amount of banner?
I think so. Although I don't know whether you're judging it in terms of time spent attempting to do banter or
quality.
actual quality of banter,
Yeah,
because I think it's been quite poor.
I think it's been good.
Yeah. Okay. Good. I think it's been good as well.
Yeah. Your banner. I don't know.
Yeah. Many episodes of this podcast ago. I guess episode 27.
Oh.
You pitched to me the prospect of watching 2 documentaries. Well, you gave me a choice. You were like, would you like to watch this Errol Morris documentary interviewing Robert McNamara, or would you like to watch one where he interviews Donald Rumsfeld? And I was like, well, I know who Donald Rumsfeld is, and I suspect that watching that one would be considerably more infuriating. And I'm not sure I could take it right now. So I opted for the Robert McNamara, which was infuriating in its own way, but it was kind of revealing of information that I wasn't aware of, and a narrative that I didn't know, and a character that I hadn't seen on television or interacted with before. And we now know, I think, that I was correct in that expectation that watching a documentary interviewing Donald Rumsfeld would be all of those things, infuriating. And horrifying. And so, unless you haven't guessed, we have today, because we're too lazy to read something else, we're phoning another one in. We've watched the documentary. What's it actually called? The Unknown Known. The Unknown Known. Yeah, we'll get on to
I don't think it's plural. I think it's just the
Unknown Known.
Yeah, from a year after the McNamara one, I believe. Don't remember what year. But again, Errol Morris. Yeah. I will say, I think that to agree with you, I came away from the last episode that we did about Robert McNamara, and I was, I think I said something along the lines, my takeaway from that movie on the show was that he's an idiot. It's like, he was just used. He had no idea what was actually going on. He was just a numbers guy, and he just had good faith in everybody. I think that noise is that light bulb. Do you think that's being picked up?
I assumed it was a running tap.
Oh, maybe. I don't know. It might not even be getting picked up. I don't think it's fine.
If you can hear that, I'm sorry, but the other option is to podcast in the, well, it's not the dark necessarily, but
in the twilight.
In the twilight.
So I came away thinking that Robert McNamara was an idiot. And this one, so we just finished it. So I'm a little hot. Yeah. This one, I've just come away thoroughly convinced that Donald Rumsfeld is just pure evil. The man is so infuriatingly smarmy, and McNamara, you get the sense when he says something stupid and contradictory that it's just like, oh, he kind of is like, oh, why do I think that? Oh, I'm so silly. Oh, the fire bombings. Oh, yes, that was bad. Blah, 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 blah. Rumsfeld, you get the sense that, this dude eats people like McNamara for breakfast. That's what I got. It's like he knew exactly what he was doing. And when you're reminded how long his career has been, is he still alive? He must be. I'd imagine. Should have looked that up. He's still alive.
I'll have a look.
Put him on death watch if he isn't. Or if he is. You're just disgusted, because it's like in this movie you just go line by line through all of these. It's kind of framed by all of these different memos that he's written about oh, today I talked about torture, or oh, Condoleezza Rice, you suck, or oh, Vietnam, getting pretty crazy, huh? And you're just reminded that it's been the same 5 guys behind the scenes doing things for so long in American domestic and foreign policy. I mean, this obviously focused a lot more on foreign policy as the Secretary of Defense for quite some time. But my man was just evil. And the things that he's done, is he alive?
Yeah.
Put him on death watch. That one put him on death watch maliciously, like everybody else. I don't know. I'm still mad, and we'll get into all of the crazy things that he said in this movie. But I'm just infuriated, because it's Okay, well, I'll pinpoint one thing. When you're watching him give press conferences as Secretary of Defense with Bush, you're just like stunned by how Trumpian he is and the way that he treats the press and the like non-answers that he gives. And it's just like, it's just infuriating. I was just so mad watching it, being like, maybe I was also mad just because it's like, okay, liberals like to pretend that like Trump's this brand new thing, but it's like, go back and watch how he treated people during the Iraq War and the war in Afghanistan. It's like, it's just maddening. He knew what he was doing too, and it's just so evil. That's my takeaway.
Yeah, we both came away with this feeling watching those press conferences. Yeah, there's just something incredibly Trumpian about his use of language. It's weird because his presentation is entirely different. I don't know what. Yeah, maybe it's just that Donald Trump reads as more of an idiot.
Yeah.
Anything that you listen to Donald Rumsfeld say, it's kind of like, is this some kind of wisdom, or is it idiocy? Like, is he speaking total nonsense all the time?
Yeah.
But with Trump, you just sort of know that you're speaking nonsense. He's speaking nonsense, but there's no way to break through to him. So you're just sort of like baffled nonetheless. Yeah. Whereas with Rumsfeld, it's kind of like you come away with this question in your mind, like, or I can imagine the press or one experiencing him and being like, oh, that's really clever. And then thinking about it, and actually, I can't possibly repeat the words that he said in that order, and I can't work out the chain of logic in any of it. And, like, he's constructed a sentence that has gotten us basically back to the same point where we started, and we've not really gained any new information.
Yeah.
But, it's masterful.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's like modern political just BS. I mean, it's always that kind of political talk has always been a thing, but like he has absolutely mastered it. And one thing that I was thinking was that like when he's at that stage of his career and he's like the top dude basically, it's like he seemed like a mix of George H.W. Bush and Trump, because he had, I don't know if like all of those dudes just got together and they were like, Americans respond best to like a vague country home accent that you can't quite pin it down, and it's just like, you know, Reagan took it to like an ultra thing, but like George H.W. Bush had it too, where he's like, I'm just I'm getting stepped on by the big Washington folk kind of thing. It's like he kind of has that, but he totally has the Trump just like baffle you with meaningless words until you're just like, well, forget it. It's like
he clearly had no respect for members of the press in exactly the
Which
same
I
way that
respect a
Trump
little
did.
bit.
Yeah, it's hard not to be like, yeah, fair play. Like to watch somebody respond to a question with "that's a stupid question."
Yeah, straight up.
Yeah. but it use several sentences and sort of dance around it a bit, or like even when he's doing a direct refusal to answer a question, it's still sort of slightly funny or slightly crafted in a way which is still meant to leave you a little bit baffled and taken aback, and it's almost meant to prevent the rebuttal, you know, or like prevent the follow-up, or leave somebody just a little bit like
it's semantics,
floundering. I mean, like this man's use of, but also fascination with, like if we're going to get into the point where we're going to do like deep psychological analysis of this person, like I really think so much could be written or considered or talked about his use of language, his fascination with language, his fascination with meaning and definition, and what it says about his connection to the world and reality, almost in terms of like constructing a world of meaning for himself, or constructing a world of meaning for other people, and sort of trying to share that understanding of the world, kind of thing.
Yeah, because there's that moment, right, where some poor reporter from like the New York Times or Washington Post or some other just respectable institution said something.
Want to make some joke about like, sir, Mr. President, sir.
Yeah, exactly. How dare you, sir? Like I think you're supposed to imply that like a week before, this reporter had been like, okay, Mr. Rumsfeld, you need to like come back to the next meeting and look up the definition of like guerrilla warfare, insurgency, and a third word, which I'll get to in a second, where they basically are, because Rumsfeld's trying to be like, there's no organized guerrilla resistance in Iraq. Everything's going fine. There's no counterinsurgency. Everything's going fine. We're all doing, this is all fine in Iraq. When it very obviously, clearly wasn't. And he comes back to the next meeting and is like, well, I looked up the dictionary definition. And he's kind of laughing while he does it, like, hey, we're just joking here. This isn't about, the mass murder of, up to 1 million people. And, he says, I looked up that word, and I looked up insurgency, and I looked up a third word, and I forget what that is. And the guy says, oh, well, I told you to look up quagmire and what that meant. And he is like, oh, quagmire. Well, I forgot about that one. And then he just, moves on, and everyone's like, ha, 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 that was funny. And then, 5 minutes later, they're like, wait a minute, he didn't answer the question. Is this a quagmire? So you're right. It's that, whenever anyone does a thing where they're like, well, look up the dictionary definition of this and you'll see. And it's like, apart from the obvious, you're losing the connotation of why this word was obviously meant, you can just be schmarmy and be like, well, technically this isn't a quagmire, or technically this isn't a guerrilla insurgency because of X, Y, and Z, when it's in reality, that's exactly what's going on. You're right to point out that what that says about his psychological profile is damning, but it's also I feel, what do you think? Did you get the sense that he only really got to that point when he was serving under W? Because it seems that kind of, he almost perfected his semantics and his speaking to the press by then, and then just was oh, I'll just use this dictionary definition crap. Whereas before that, he was kind of well, I don't know, maybe he asked Nixon to look up some definitions or something at some point. I kind of forget.
I don't recall. I don't think we got any. Although there was very little, what's the word, contemporary or of the time clips of him speaking for any of his career, basically up until when he entered the Bush administration. I think there was lots of his memos that were still being read, kind of things, and things that he'd written. But I guess I feel like we just don't get the information necessary to know quite when that developed. Yeah, but whether it clearly it's a skill, I suppose. But yeah, I'm not sure. Sure.
Yeah, you just get a very this dude is just dancing circles around everybody, and he's just going to be in your face being like, no, I'm not going to answer your question about the atrocities that we may or may not be committing in Guantanamo Bay, in Abu Ghraib, in the entire country of Iraq. I'm not going to answer your question directly about oh, well, you knew that Saddam didn't have any WMDs. And he's like, well, that was would it be an unknown known? Yeah, I think that would be an unknown known. Because he does this stupid thing about trying to come up with all of the different combinations of unknown known, known unknown, unknown unknown, known known. And the unknown known is basically just paranoia, I think, another word for paranoia. Because he basically just says, well, we didn't know things that were probably facts. And for him, an unknown known is that there must have been WMDs in Iraq. And even though we didn't have any evidence, that didn't matter, because not having evidence isn't a lack of evidence. And you're just kind of while you're trying to process that, he moves on. It's a complete failure of debating in general and just talking to people, which is funny because that's exactly what the movie was, I guess. It's just him talking to someone. And you get the sense that you can't really know the true horrors of everything that he's done just by speaking to him, because you're going to get these smarmy replies no matter what you say. This is a guy who's been doing it forever, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So,
Yeah, I guess it'd be interesting to consider or talk about the difference between this interview with Rumsfeld and the interview with McNamara. Whether you think one was in some ways a success and a failure, or whether what the outcomes that we got from this one were different from the McNamara one, or the way McNamara responded to this kind of interviewing. Whether it's just that you get the sense that, because you started off by saying that McNamara was, well, I can't remember what phrase you don't want to put words in your mouth, just a bit of an idiot.
Yeah.
Or at least maybe we'd be kind of be naive,
Naive, exactly.
he was just somebody who was brought in to do a particular job. He was just a stats guy. He wasn't the guy making the main decisions, he had a degree of, he created a degree of separation for himself. But also it felt like Errol Morris in that documentary was beginning to like it was almost like trying to give McNamara the opportunity to I don't know, like bare his soul a bit more, sort of
100%.
confess or like. But then I feel like, as I recall, the end of that documentary was he never really quite got to the point where he sort of like confessed kind of thing. He sort of like he shut himself off at a certain point, and like it was like. But as we were watching, I was thinking about the distinction between the two and the extent to which, like, both McNamara also seemed to have like a constructed, prearranged language sort of account of what had happened, you know, kind of thing. And in some ways, there was quite a lot of similarity between his experience and description of his reality, I suppose, or his history, which seemed quite similar to Rumsfeld's in that same way of being like pre-constructed and quite secure and having a degree of confidence in it, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Rumsfeld comes across as a lot more secure and a lot less shakeable.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I do wonder whether there is a parallel to be drawn between the two of them, in that there is an extent to which they both seem to think of themselves as maybe this is the only thing you can do when you're put in that kind of position. Or maybe rather that those kind of positions end up being filled with people who have a certain type of mentality, which is that you are sort of a stooge to events and history.
Yeah.
And a reluctance to bear responsibility, kind of thing.
Yeah.
I mean, there were certainly degrees to which this interview with Rumsfeld attitude is one in which he really is he feels himself to be sort of immune to criticism almost, or like doesn't actually seem to even think he took any decisions, you know, or like there seems to be no chain of causation between any of the decisions that he's made.
Yeah.
I don't know whether that
Yeah, no, I think a good distinction to be made is that I don't remember if Errol Morris asked McNamara that question that he asked Rumsfeld right at the end of like, do you make history or are you made by history? I got the feeling that McNamara definitely thought he was just along for the ride, dude. Just like, whatever, man. We're just kind of, you know, Kennedy's going to do his thing and he's the president. I'm the one crunching the numbers. You know what I mean? But I get the feeling that Rumsfeld, despite how he answered the question, which was a complete non-answer, he basically just went, I don't know, bro. Like, I think he thinks he's a master of history. And I think it's pretty hard if you were in his shoes not to think that. Because it's like if you go through the different administrations that he was part of and like the different shenanigans that he may or may not have pulled to like stay in power and like have things go his way, it would be hard not to think that you kind of control everything. And I think that's the main thing, is that Rumsfeld is a lot more confident in himself. For quite frankly, for good reason. I mean, the dude stuck around for so long because he knew what he was doing and he knew how to control power and he knew how to like manipulate people and all that stuff. Do you get the feeling that he actually wanted to be Reagan's running mate or not? Because I was kind of like, I wasn't sure. The movie tried to frame it like, yeah, he really wanted it, but it's like, I don't know. They make a lot of like this rivalry in air quotes between him and George H.W. Bush that I kind of don't buy. It's like one's the like future Secretary of Defense and one is like the head of the CIA and then the president. Like, I don't think there might have been like interpersonal, like, oh, you know, I wanted to kill this many people, but he wanted to kill this many people, blah, blah, blah. But like, I don't know. I kind of think that whether or not it was all planned, I don't think Rumsfeld was actually that upset about not getting the VP pick under Reagan. What do you think?
I think it's very hard to say. I think he was never going to admit it.
Sure.
And I suppose he was always going to present it as him getting what he wanted. And I think that was the problem with this documentary in general. Clearly there were places where Rumsfeld wasn't willing to talk in the way that Morris probably wanted him to talk. Like, McNamara was far more forthcoming. And so through McNamara's words and his account, you then get an account and a narrative with which you can build a narrative for a film which covers the majority of his life. And you feel like you get all of those key moments in quite good detail. Whereas I got the impression anyway that perhaps Morris really hadn't managed to get the full account from Rumsfeld in a way that you could actually build quite a strong narrative for a documentary.
Yeah.
So it did feel like there were moments which were skipped over in some ways, or it was very hard for then Morris to present the counter argument. The way that Rumsfeld talks about that moment in 1980 rather, where he was a contender to be the vice presidential running mate for Reagan. The way that Rumsfeld wants to talk about it is that he caught wind of, like, he knew it was him and he knew it was Bush who were contenders, but he also puts a third name on the table. There was this potential discussion of former President Ford being the vice presidential running mate. And the way that, that's right, isn't it?
Yeah.
And the way that Rumsfeld presents it is that Rumsfeld thought this was a terrible idea. And in the end, his notion that was a terrible idea was borne out by other people also agreeing with him, kind of thing. Yeah. So he constructs that entire race around his idea for who it ought to be and who it ought not be, and how he was correct and everybody else thought he was correct.
Oh, true.
And so when in Rumsfeld's account, when he hears word that Reagan is going to pick Bush to be the running mate, he's like, oh, thank God, just so long as you're not going to pick Gerald Ford. And there is no mention necessarily of like how Rumsfeld actually felt about being snubbed, I suppose.
Yeah.
And it is put to him that had you been the running mate in 1980, there was a very good chance that you would have ended up being president instead of George H. Bush. But he does quite a good show of sort of like laughing that off kind of thing. He wasn't really that concerned about the idea kind of thing. I feel like it would probably be legitimate to think that this person did want to be president.
Yeah.
But there was another, I'll stop talking in a minute. There was another aspect of which wasn't really covered by this film, was also like his connection to business and the relationship, the idea of him being like a sort of stooge or a figurehead for business in politics kind of thing. And maybe that was his key interest in being in politics. It was not like political power per se, but like economic and political influence sort of tied together. I don't know whether.
Yeah, well, I have a
truth in that.
I mean, it's the same thing for H.W. Bush. It's the exact same thing. Like, I mean, get ready to clutch your pearls, but like, there's a revolving door between the private sector and the public sector and the federal government. Oh my God, no way. I mean, regardless, he definitely wound up getting what he wanted. I like imagining that Reagan, when he was telling him that he went with H.W. Bush, he had him on like speakerphone and that like Gerald Ford was in the room. And he's like, well, as long as you didn't go with that idiot Ford. And Ford's just like, oh, hey, yeah. I mean, it's another thing that's interesting about that whole dynamic is like you really get a sense of like where the power kind of lay in those early years and kind of before that too. Like when the narrative of the documentary seems to suggest that there was this failed assassination attempt on Gerald Ford's life, and it kind of made Rumsfeld rethink some things. And he was kind of like, okay, me and the boys were talking, Ford, and, we're going to resign if you don't kind of start to change things up and change up your cabinet and, put your foot down on certain things that obviously benefit like the private sector like enormously. And I think that like, I don't know. Actually, before I go any further, I thought it was really interesting that it kind of seemed like a lot of that was that influence that he won after that was won at Kissinger's expense, which I thought was really interesting because Kissinger kind of like had two roles, I think, right? And then was kind of like chopped up and given to other people. I don't really know what to make of that, but that was interesting. It kind of made it seem like Kissinger, as much as you think of him as one of the boys, like the boys included Rumsfeld and Cheney. And like that was kind of it, like no room for a third boy. It's like kind of just us and we're making things work. But anyway, to like tie it back to what I was saying, like H.W. Bush and Rumsfeld 150,000 million% represented the same interests in terms of like making sure that we have a continued war after communism, like a phantom person to just pump money into, to build up the defense sector, to just give contracts to our buddies and to get slush funds or whatever. And so I think maybe that's the thing that kind of makes me think like maybe there was a little bit of personal ambition where they kind of like agreed like, okay, one of us is going to be like the vice president and then probably go on to be president, and like, we'll just leave it up to like that like actor from California, I guess, to decide. But like either way, it doesn't really matter because like one of us is going to get it. So maybe there was like a bit of personal ambition on Rumsfeld's part to like be chosen over H.W. Bush, because it did kind of seem like there was a bit of like, it seemed like the press certainly played it up to kind of both of their benefit, but like maybe there was a bit of personal rivalry between him and H.W.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I don't know if that really matters because again, they both got exactly what they wanted.
Yeah, and Rumsfeld did end up playing a really key, as I recall anyway. Maybe you can remind me whether he had or what his role was during the Reagan administration. There was certainly footage of him around just in the run up to, it was in 1989, I think, there was footage of him attempting to, well, I wanted to say making a powerful case. Obviously, he didn't make a good argument, but like arguing for the necessity of America not stepping back on the world stage in terms of its military influence. And so clearly he was still in a position to... It was quite interesting to hear you put that narrative on it, because I hadn't really picked that up from the documentary very much, that his key intention was to like continue to have all this money be funneled from government to military expenditure. And the way to do that was to keep this sense of there being great... sort of America continuing to be imperiled post-Cold War, and the necessity of having a sense of an enemy, and the requirement to maintain military spending, I suppose.
Yeah.
And he clearly played a very important role in that around the end of the Cold War, in that end of the Cold War era kind of thing. So clearly he still continued to make a very important contribution to that effort, regardless of what role he was playing in the various administrations at the time.
He might not have been in the administration. He might have just been a guy.
Sure.
Like that everybody knew.
I mean, he still would have been somebody that people turned to, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Because he had been Secretary of Defense already, right?
Yeah, I didn't realize that.
Yeah,
he was Secretary of Defense.
What was he, the youngest Secretary of Defense ever, I think, or at the time anyway?
Oh, maybe. Wasn't that McNamara? Not Secretary of Defense, but just like he was the youngest. Oh, maybe. I don't know. I don't know. These bastards.
Anyway,
confused.
so he was Gerald Ford's Secretary of Defense.
Yeah. Another thing that baffles me, and it's what you're saying is, it's like, this dude is so open about the evil things that he's doing, because it was like they showed a cover of some magazine, I think it was Fortune, where they literally had a photo of him, and in big red font it said something like a politician in the private sector or something like that. It might have been reversed. It was like a private sector guy who's also a politician, and it's like, wait a minute, does that not raise any eyebrows here? Or like, even when you're saying, when he just got up in front of everybody and was like, he made the point that you always hear, that's like, well, who's going to run the world if it's not America? We need to be strong. We need to be strong against these dang communists, against these dang terrorizers. But like, he also made a really big point when he was talking about communism and when he was talking about terrorism, where he was like, who's actually maintained America's role as peacekeeper around the world? And then he says, like, it's the people who have invested billions of dollars into the defense industry. And it's like, he should be shot just for saying that. It's like, what the fuck?
Yeah, he's tantamount to say, like, he draws it all the way back to like FDR, basically.
Yeah.
It's like, it starts with FDR, and it's everybody who spent all this money.
I think he says Truman. I think
Truman.
he's careful not to say FDR.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, Truman. But like, yeah. But he's very clearly like He's basically praising the military-industrial complex.
Literally. He's literally doing
without
that.
saying the phrase, he's basically describing the military-industrial complex over the past, 40-odd years at that point, and being like, this is why America has the role that it does, has the prestige that it does, and there's no attempt to veil that at all, right?
Yeah. And like, all of these conservative talking heads were just like, oh, he's making a lot of sense. It's just like, oh my God, how stupid can you be? And it's like, yeah, obviously you draw a straight line from the war with communism to the war on terror. I thought it was so funny, just as a like funny historical note, that the way that he kind of got what he wanted a lot of times was just through schmoozing. And like how crazy that is, because, when the kind of war on communism was like dying down and everyone was like, all right, well, like it's the Soviet Union, come on, what are they going to do? He would like take groups of congressmen into, I forget where, I think in the White House somewhere, take them into a little private room, get the president to say hi to him, and then be like, show them photos of like, I don't know, like bunkers that the Soviet Union had, I guess, and be like, look what these Reds are doing. And then they would be like, whoa, I didn't realize that like they were preparing for war. Like, what?
This is the bit in the documentary when there's this massive montage of like graphs that presumably he had produced that were all like their spending versus our spending, their military build-up versus our military build-up, their
So
nuclear
good.
capacity versus our nuclear capacity. And it's like the Soviet Union is going up in all metrics and the US is going down in all metrics. And as you say, yeah, he's just like... you try using the sort of like the pomp of the White House and the possibility of meeting the president as a way to schmooze American politicians and sort of like win them over to this idea that like America is falling behind in some kind of in the sort of like the spending aspect of the Cold War, which was I don't know.
It was literally just like graphs with no labels on their X and Y axis, just lines going up.
Yeah,
and lines going down.
it just reminded me of the Reagan graph of like your taxes, their plan and our plan, and the difference in taxes, kind of thing.
People just go, God damn, look at that graph.
Yeah.
Where did he go to college? Okay, I'm gonna look it up. And if he went to Yale, I'm gonna shoot myself. He must have gone to an Ivy League. Okay, I got his Wikipedia page pulled up here. On his Wikipedia page, it says there's a heading that's like, return to the private sector. And it's like, oh my God.
I'm preparing to restrain Jack.
Oh, okay. He only went to Princeton.
Oh, great. Okay.
God. And then Georgetown. Interesting. I'm not going to say that I actually believe this, Dan. But
okay, we're going to, like, we spent half of our time watching this documentary concocting our own conspiracy theory, and I think it's going to come out now, so.
Potentially.
Yeah.
Okay.
Jack has
All
some
I'm saying,
suspicions.
I'm just asking
Jack
questions.
has some questions, like, he's just like considering some research.
I'm an independent researcher.
Yeah.
Just go back. All I'm saying, and I'm not going to say anything after I say this, just go back and look at photos of the person that is supposedly Donald Rumsfeld when he's running for Congress. Because that's a meathead, dude. He's like a big boy.
Yeah, he's got like the buzz cut.
Yeah.
And yeah, he's pretty big.
I don't know why anyone would want to, like, presumably assassinate and then replace Donald Rumsfeld, but, like, all I'm saying...
Yeah. Did we decide if that is indeed what happened, when it was?
I think...
Sorry, go on.
I was going to say, I think relatively soon after he won Congress.
Okay.
Because then he kind of starts, like you said, wearing the glasses and doing a different haircut.
Yeah, he starts wearing the big 70s glasses and the haircut changes. And I think, one could easily just be like, yeah, fair play. That's Donald Rumsfeld, whatever.
Yeah, a normal person would be like, yeah, that's the same person.
Yeah.
He also lost, like, 50 pounds.
Yeah.
What I'm saying.
My theory was that, like, the ostensible assassination attempt of Gerald Ford was actually a successful assassination of Donald Rumsfeld,
Damn,
and that's when he was
excellent.
replaced. Nobody questions the motivations of an assassination when the person is stood next to the president. I heard that in a movie once.
I like how the headline that they showed in the movie about, because I didn't know anything about this assassination attempt. The headline they showed was like, woman attempts to assassinate Ford as rebelling against, quote unquote, the system. It's like, what the hell does that mean? Comrade, nonetheless. Yeah, another thing I'd kind of like to say is you brought up the differences between how McNamara and Rumsfeld both related to their war crimes in their horrific pasts. Okay, I will say, at least McNamara had the cojones to basically be like, yeah, if we had lost, I would have been a war criminal. You would never get McNamara or Rumsfeld to admit that. He would just be like, oh, well, who knows?
Yeah. Because like in the case of McNamara, it would have taken history to judge him. Whereas Donald Rumsfeld's clearly in the position, or thinks he's in the position to judge himself. He probably would have just resigned, to be fair.
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah.
No, threatened to resign anyway. There's a number of times in this documentary where he either threatens to resign or offers his resignation, which is meant to be, you're meant to think it's a sort of like a humble, magnanimous gesture, but I
don't know. When Cheney's involved. Cheney, just like, if you had to cast a sleazy looking dude who's like controlling things from behind the scenes, you would cast the person Dick Cheney. Whenever you see him, it's just like, ooh, that guy's evil. Don't like him. But yeah, another interesting thing is that, like, at any point did you get the feeling that McNamara was, like, combative towards Errol Morris? Because Rumsfeld certainly was at certain points. Like, there were points where Rumsfeld straight up was like, ha, owned you with facts and logic there. Let me chalk that up on my chalkboard. And you just kind of get the feeling that Errol Morris is behind the camera going, oh my God.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the documentary, Errol Morris asks him, why are you doing this documentary? I think it's probably just that, like, he misses owning with facts and logic members of the press. He's probably just wanted to have another, like, what's the right metaphor? Innings at bat, I suppose.
yeah, honestly. I mean, I also wonder how much of it is, like, if you're Errol's people, you probably have to be, like, pitch it to these psychopaths as, like, you know, big Hollywood director as successful movies wants to come interview you and
let
like,
you set the record straight.
Set the record straight, and also like you'll be back in the spotlight once again. That's another thing. Like, I wonder how these people relate to themselves once their careers are kind of ostensibly over and they're just on like a speaker circuit. Because it's like you've been the dude for quite some time and you've held quite a bit of power. Because at a certain point, you've just you know, a new group has to come in and be like, all right, you're kind of the old man now. You know what I mean? Like, McNamara was fine with it because he was never the dude. But, like, Rumsfeld, it's kind of like, yeah, I'd like to hear what he has to say now. Because, like, H.W. Bush, the way he just got around it was just by being a decayed, like, demented, shriveled mess. Like, but Rumsfeld, I don't know. I guess you don't hear much from him anymore, but, yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting to point out that, like, McNamara was actually only in the spotlight for like 6 or 7 years or something. And presumably didn't really choose it. Yeah. Whereas like Rumsfeld like clearly chose a career in politics kind of thing. Yeah. Much as he wanted to suggest that he made very few choices and mostly he was just like victim to circumstances kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, clearly he I mean, presumably he had an attachment to the power, and yeah, you're quite right to say, like, what does that feel like afterwards? I mean, I don't know whether either of us will ever know.
Yeah, no kidding. Until we form our sect, neither of us will ever know.
Yeah. It might have to be a cult.
I had sect cult.
Yeah,
same thing. Yeah, God. If I try and pinpoint maybe the thing that made me so mad about Rumsfeld is it's like you can point to certain reasons, I guess, why people are like Trump people. They're shitty reasons, right? But like why people are Trump people or why people like liked Bush. You know what I mean? For the while that everybody did like Bush. But like with Rumsfeld, he is just like a perfect distillation of like everything bad about politicians that literally every single person hates, putting forward despicable, disgusting not policies, but like, yeah, torture. So what? You know what I mean? That it's like, you kind of just can't help but hate him. And like, I was too young to really like remember the like discourse around Robert McNamara, or not McNamara, Rumsfeld. But like, you would have to assume that a lot of people really just were like, oh, this dude's sleazy. We like Bush, but like this guy's sleazy. He's you know, he went to Princeton and he's trying to, well, I guess, I don't know. Where did Bush go? Did Bush go to Yale? So I don't know. But it's like, yeah, I don't know. The thing that pisses me off the most about him is that he's just so transparently evil. It's like, he's like, yeah, man, the world runs by just putting billions of dollars into the defense industry. Yeah, man, I'm like a private sector guy in politics and I'm literally trying to screw every American over. But like, has somehow still managed to be Machiavellian enough, I guess, to like work his way through at least 4 decades of American politics, you know? It's like, it is everything wrong with like an American democracy. That it's just like, oh, you know, this guy's been in power forever, you know?
It's funny, my sense of him is quite different to yours, I think, in the sense of like, I didn't read him as evil all of the time. I mostly just read him as evil when he stopped talking and grinned. Like, he has an evil smile. And it was almost like, you know, in like a horror movie where they like they try and they accentuate a grin to make it look sinister and evil. Like that's what he's got. He's got like a slightly like demonic, slightly sort of demonic veil falls over his face quite often, and he's got that kind of angular face in such a way that light falls over it in a very kind of like sinister way. The character, if I was to compare him to a character that I sort of do encounter or can imagine encountering, it's kind of like a charismatic like college professor. Something like that. Someone who speaks in kind of truisms and truths and aphorisms. It feels like his entire brain, his entire speech pattern. At a certain point in the documentary, he talks about there being him having a collection of like catchphrases.
Yeah.
Or maybe not. Maybe aphorisms is the right word.
That he made up himself.
Yeah. I mean, like, I've never come across somebody who speaks in such like almost like he's a talking fortune cookie or something. like there's some like cryptic meaning in everything that he says, and you're sort of struggling to work out what it is. But it kind of reminds me of attachments that I've had to certain like intellectual characters who like speak in these cryptic ways, but you're like, ooh, it really draws you in with the possibility of there being meaning in the things that he says.
Yeah.
So I can sort of imagine someone being won over by a certain aspect of that, what could be read, what I might read as sort of like charismatic intelligence kind of thing. And there is a degree to which his belligerence is probably quite enjoyable for certain people. Yeah. I mean, obviously, I think because Trump had much more of could concoct a sort of sense of his folksiness. I mean, he's the least folksy, like...
Rum's folksy.
Yeah, but I don't know, like...
I know what you mean.
Yeah, the thing that attracted people to Trump was never going to... Rumsfeld was never going to be able to do it in quite the same way, kind of thing.
Sure.
But there's a respect for the belligerence that I can imagine people having.
Yeah.
So I don't know whether he would always be read as evil by all people under all circumstances. I can imagine somebody watching in those press conferences and being like, "Yeah, too right."
Sticking to those damn lib reporters.
Yeah. He's kind of a combination of. There is something very like, just a Ben Shapiro-esque in like his.
I was going to
like,
say that 100%.
Yeah. And it's sort of like I mean, you were the ones to use facts and logic as a phrase. In his. Yeah, he's very much a kind of like owning debate, kind of like debate club, sort of like sophistry almost.
Yeah,
he's kind of like he's a sophist in his sort of like.
Yeah. Well, the evil and the liking him, I don't think are. Maybe I should take that back because I don't think they are mutually exclusive. Like with Trump, you know, when Trump was like,
incredibly funny.
Exactly. When Trump was like, yeah, do I think we should be torturing people? And like, waterboarding? No. And everyone's like, what? And then he goes, I think we should be doing more. And everyone's like, whoa, we love it. Like, everybody knows that shit is evil, but it's like, it comes from somewhere else. Just like sticking it to the system, sticking it to everybody. So like, during the Iraq War, when everybody was like, for some reason, all now excited about invading Iraq, which, side note, how great was the moment when he was like, Errol was like, so everybody thought that Saddam Hussein was like linked to Al Qaeda, and like, was that your fault? Like, were you the one putting that misinformation out there and like linked to 9/11? He was like, oh no, of course not. I don't know where anybody got that information. And I tell you what, nobody thought that. And then he like quotes all these studies and like shows video footage of him being like, yes, he was. Of course, we all know this. Blah blah blah. He's of course linked to Al Qaeda. I guess that like those two things aren't really mutually exclusive. Him just being perceived as evil, but also being kind of likable. But maybe he just wanted to be likable. He wanted to be that guy, and it reached its peak under W. Bush, where he was able to have enough of the spotlight to really perfect that like likable, hey, everybody loves me kind of vibe that maybe he didn't get, that maybe he thought he was going to get when he thought he would get the nod under Reagan for VP. But like, I don't know. I just read him as someone who's just so evil you can't even laugh at the stuff he does like you do with Trump. You know what I mean? But maybe that's just because Trump's very clearly stupid and Rumsfeld very clearly isn't. You know, disgusted by all of it. How about that bit where one of the last things in the movie is, because he's been calling all these memorandums that he writes snowflakes, right? Because for whatever reason, he's trying to be cool. It's like another thing where he's like, everybody calls my memos snowflakes. And it's like, you are the only one who calls them that. At the very end, the last memo that he writes is to all of the Pentagon staff. And it's something like, I've written a lot of these over the years, and everybody's gotten one, except a lot of people haven't gotten one, so now I'm writing it to all of the staff. That just, like, seemed to me as, like, maybe I'm doing a little bit of armchair psychology, but him, like, trying to put forward this view of himself that he really wants everyone to believe is, like, you know, this bit of a hard ass, and he sends all these memos out, but it's, like, most of the people that he sent that to probably, like, never got a memo from him in his entire life. And it just, again, speaks to this, like, I don't know. Was he, like, wooed by a bit of the, like, spotlight under Bush where he had all of this airtime and TV and, like, maybe, you know, after the whole Reagan thing when he just went on the private sector, like, TV circuit, he kind of got, like, a taste for it. And then under Bush, he really got a taste for it. And so then he sent out this memo being like, oh, I know you all think of me like this. I just imagine every employee being like, I don't think of you like that at all. Yeah. Donald Rumsfeld, but okay, whatever. Just speaks to his psychopath.
Yeah, I mean, he definitely comes across as you can imagine him a boss where he has a completely different conception of how people think of him as how people actually think of him.
Yeah.
The way I sort of like interpreted that memo was like, I know you think that I said a lot of these, and I know you think that everybody's constantly being bombarded with them, but like there are quite a lot of people who haven't been lucky enough to have received a memo from me. So here's one for everybody. Yeah. It's like the participation memo for everybody. Like,
that ego definitely built up over the years.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
I'm okay. So if we take two views of Robert McNamara, God damn it, I keep doing that. Donald Rumsfeld's life. One where he's just like the guy holding it all together, and we got to take these, truths as they are. To be the America that we want to be and to maintain peace around the world, we got to sink all this money into the defense industry, and we got to maybe do a little bit of torturing now and then. And, God damn it, it's not great, but we got to do it. That's like he was the guy that kind of got things done view of Rumsfeld. And hey, he did it in like a funny enough way so that I feel like I can go to sleep at night being an American and not being disgusted by my government. So whatever. And then the like complete opposite Machiavellian view is like this dude helped orchestrate being in Vietnam longer. This dude helped orchestrate like all of these horrible things in terms of, basically everything from like the 70s to like, post 9/11 Iraq war and everything. This dude was like arch Machiavellian, making everything happen with Cheney, just purely for the benefit of people to make money and for him to like maintain power. When you walked away from this movie, where did you feel like you've kind of landed a little bit more in? Because I think I kind of fall a little bit more on the Machiavellian side. And I don't think there are many people that I would say that about. Maybe Cheney is another one. But like, I think compare him to McNamara, I think it might be two ends of the spectrum for me.
I definitely think of Cheney as being very, at least he has, the narrative and the story around him is that he really both, I know I'm getting some of this from the movie that was made about Dick Cheney. But as I get all of my information, I'm sorry.
Sure.
I don't know. I definitely have the sense of Cheney as being somebody who manipulated circumstances and really put himself in the position of being the true sort of like power behind the throne in the Bush administration kind of thing. When it comes to the sort of like, when it comes to the Bush administration, I guess I've come to think of Dick Cheney as being a kind of like, not even second fiddle, but like tertiary fiddle to the whole sort of like setup. But you do get the impression from this documentary that like, I don't know, I could fully imagine it being a narrative that he'd kind of want there to be more truth in than there actually was. But I mean, maybe we could talk about the one. I mean, we've already talked about it a little bit. The one instance of him potentially being Machiavellian or taking a risk and manipulating circumstances to his own advantage is this time when he threatened to resign from the Gerald Ford administration.
Yeah.
Which and then is convinced to stay on, and Ford makes all of these changes in the administration, which sort of like are seen to advantage his positions and disadvantage other people, kind of thing. So certainly in that instance, you get this sense that he was at least able to manipulate circumstances, but I don't know whether this documentary gives us enough to go on. So yeah, what's the other option? Machiavelli or
McNamara?
Or McNamara? Yeah. Well, he's definitely not.
Yeah.
Is he Mac? I'm still struggling with this. Is there a massive distinction between the two of them, or are they more similar than they first appear? Because there was one really, I don't know what I can't recall the exact language, and maybe you can. But I feel like we both watched one segment of this documentary and came away with this idea that like Donald Rumsfeld just doesn't think that there is any lesson to be learned from one incident to the next, kind of thing. Like Morris is really trying to push him, like, you were involved in this calamitous end to the Vietnam War, and he's really trying to get him to be like, were there lessons that should have been learned from Vietnam when we were in Iraq? I mean, that was basically the implication he was trying to make. And Rumsfeld sort of like twists and turns with all of his sort of like fortune cookie aphorisms, and seems to come down on the position that like there is nothing to be learned from one instance. Like every instance of a piece of history is just things happening, and you sort of do the best in the moment when things are happening, but like things don't have history and things don't have consequences, or he at least seems he presents there seems to be a presentation of his philosophy being that things don't have consequences. And so in some respects I feel like he's quite close to McNamara in the sense that they were both in this position of just being people being battered around by circumstances and doing the best that they could, kind of thing.
That's a good point.
And it's all like, and like similarly with McNamara as with Rumsfeld, it kind of feels like there's degrees of evil. I feel like. And also, like, you get it. There's a segment in the documentary when he's talking about his condoning of certain enhanced interrogation techniques for Guantanamo Bay, and like, which ones am I going to sign off of, and which ones am I not going to sign off of, and what specific circumstances am I going to say when certain things can happen, and to what degree. And there's one point when where they use the phrase like light pushing is to be allowed to be used, along with a whole slew of other like more openly violent techniques, kind of thing. And then later on, he's asked to confront this sort of like, here is this sort of like nuanced, balanced language that you put forward for forms of torture to be used in certain circumstances. And then he has to confront the torture that was actually going on at Abu Ghraib prison. And he's clearly putting on this sort of like horrified, taking this position of being horrified. This is not what I intended. This went much further than I thought, kind of thing. But I feel like there's a similarity in that instance with the degree to which McNamara was very much like, if things had just been, if my plan had just been followed, kind of thing, if it's very kind of like removed from the reality of things. Like he seems to very much think that like there is a degree to which sort of prisons are a certain way and it's fine, and there's no like my position would just be that like all of these things are forms of violence, and like like you can't like there's not. I mean, I suppose you can quibble with like degrees of acceptable and non-acceptable violence, but that's what you're doing. You're sort of like you're quibbling over nuances, kind of thing. And I think they both seem to be trying to find the perfected sort of nuanced level of acceptable evil to take, kind of thing. And they both seem to come away with this general sense of their history being that these things have gotten out of hand, kind of thing. But it's not necessarily their responsibility, you know, like they were trying to find the right nuanced way of going about these things. They were both sort of calculators. Like McNamara is much more presented as a sort of stats calculator, kind of thing. But I don't know. I feel like there's a parallel. I don't know whether you got any of that sense. Does feel like there's a parallel in their character of their willingness to be close to history, but also separated from it, kind of thing.
When it suits them.
I suppose. Yeah.
Well, definitely for Rumsfeld.
Yeah.
I mean, there's definitely that whole thing about like, well, I authorized this torture, not that torture. Like, there's 150,000,000% more nuance to what actually happened there than what Rumsfeld said. Right?
Yeah, I mean, we can't take his word for any of this.
Yeah, well, because let's look at what the other possible things could have been that would have happened. Either A, someone pulled him aside and was like, hey, man, authorize this stuff. It won't look too bad on you. We can extrapolate from that in some kind of legal sense. And if it ever does get out that we're doing these horrific things, then you can always fall back on like, well, I only said this. And we can kind of always fall back on like, well, he did say that, but we're kind of just doing that here. So sorry, we just took a little bit forward. Or something else happened where it was just like maybe like obviously there's more than one person in the world doing history. So like maybe it was just some either CIA or defense guy being like, tell Rumsfeld that we're only going to do this. But like, either wink, wink, nudge, nudge, he knows that we're obviously going to be doing more. Or things just got completely out of control. And we can take him at his word, where he was just like, you know, people are just going to be standing for 4 hours? I stand for 8 hours a day. How could that be bad? Like, there is more nuance to it. Again, we're kind of getting bogged down in the reality of like, for now, I'm going to be a structuralist and be like, of course, something like this was going to happen when you have a completely unaccountable war where you're straight up like, to say nothing of the like, branches of the American government that aren't accountable to the government itself, like intelligence agencies or things like that, or even parts of the military, just mercenaries, you know what I mean? So they're, you know, it's hard to say exactly what happened and who to pin the blame on, but like, I'm comfortable pinning blame on Rumsfeld for authorizing anything even remotely close to torture at all, especially when most of these guys, like these people being brought to Guantanamo or Abu Ghraib, were just like 19-year-olds that they picked up off the street and accused of being terrorists because like that's kind of how you get people scared of you. And they were just like some dude and they were just in the wrong place at the wrong time. And Rumsfeld authorized evil things to be done to them. So whatever happened.
Yeah. I think you're right. I think what he's given us is the plausible deniability version of things.
Yeah.
As you were speaking then, I was just wondering whether what we've identified instead is a characteristic of people who put themselves in power where they think they have a lot more power than they actually do.
That's a good point.
Like, they think they are actually masters of circumstances when the circumstances are masters of them, I suppose.
Yeah. Especially in a government, in an empire as sprawling as the American government.
Yeah. And it's built on inaccountability kind of thing. It's built on vagueness and sort of dark areas and like, I don't know.
Well, to run a war like the war in Iraq and in Afghanistan, you would have to have unaccountability. You would have to have people that aren't accountable to anybody because your goals aren't, first of all, they aren't legal in any sense of the word. Going into these countries and doing what he did isn't legal in any word. So to operate at all, there needs to be some kind of plausible deniability and just unaccountability.
It's really interesting to think about like how violent and oppressive systems like work on a tacit understanding that we're not going to condone, but the expectation is that these things will happen nonetheless, kind of thing. I mean, it's built into policing as much as it's built into 100%. The military, kind of thing.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Talk about it just to sink for money as well.
Yeah. Oh God. Yeah.
I think it was Street Watch LA, which is like a LA-based group that tries to help homeless people. Imagine that. They posted something on Twitter recently of like a photo of an LAPD homelessness outreach, quote unquote. And it was just these straight up, like, all it was like 3 cops wearing like bulletproof attire in front of like, because they were at the beach in Venice, in front of 3 like Judge Dredd-esque looking like dune buggies being like, with like, you know, full like armor on all of them being like, we're doing outreach to the homeless people. And it's like, what a joke when like the defense industry and what would you call like a domestic defense industry? Just an industry of exploitation and oppression, I suppose. Gets to the point where it's like...
the domestic arm of the state's violence against its population.
Exactly, yeah. RSAs. It gets to the point where people can be like... Well, like even liberals can be like look at them doing homelessness outreach, and they're like, just these like, it's just a straight up like military, like getting the goddamn Humvee, homeless man. It's
Well, that's
like,
that's the same like linguistic plausible deniability that is Donald Rumsfeld like stock and trade, right? Like as long as you can tell somebody you're doing something called homelessness outreach, it really doesn't matter what the thing actually is, kind of thing.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Like as long as you could like claim to be doing something called shock and awe, or as long as you can claim to have a definition for terrorism, it doesn't really matter. Like he does all this quibbling over definitions and getting the language right, and regardless of what the language is, the same outcomes are going to be happening in the real world, kind of thing. But he's far more, I don't know. I don't know. Yeah, I want to read him as being obsessed with the language, but maybe you're right in that. Really, what's going on is just like the language games are a plausible deniability mechanism, kind of thing, just to distance him from his evil doings.
Yeah. Is he using the language, or is the language being used by him? Wait a minute. We need to end the language.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you speak the language? Does it speak you?
Oh man.
Yeah. There's an aphorism that's either really intelligent or really stupid.
I think the latter.
Yeah.
I
sounds very Lacanian, so I ought to be on board.
Yes. I am more angry now than I was at the beginning. You're right. It's that effing smile, because it's like that smile that politicians give. Bush did it. Trump did it. Obama did it. Every politician ever does it. I don't think Biden does it just because Biden's just like, what's going on right now? But it's like that smile. That's like,
Biden can't risk a smile because he's not sure what he's going to be smiling at.
Yeah, exactly. It's like there's that smile where not half the population, Republican voters will read it as like, look at him owning the libs and like, we see what you're doing, buddy. Okay, we know you're lying, but like, hell yeah, brother. And liberals will, see it as like, oh my God, this guy, he's smiling at us. How can he see he's not being logical? But like, everyone else just sees it as like, he knows what he's doing. It's a smile to be like, what are you going to do about it?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, try me. I'm Donald Rumsfeld, baby.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like, oh my God.
Yeah.
That's what pissed me off the most, I guess, is just that he knows. He knows what he's doing, and he knows why you're angry, and he doesn't give a fuck.
I kind of respect it.
I don't. I don't. I hate it.
I mean, it's just a difference in characters, I guess.
Yeah, I hate it with every bone in my body. Just that, because he gave the most disgusting thing is like, okay, yes, we all know that like the American Armed Forces are like the most despicable thing on the planet, and we all kind of want to be like, if you join the army, that's like a pretty dumb thing to do. So like, dude, what are you doing? But like when he told that story about like the guy in the hospital because he like got
I'm glad we've come to
up.
this. Yeah, because this is such like, sorry to interrupt you,
No, go
but
for it.
like, you're watching that and you're like, oh right, we're going to get to the point where that you get in the documentary about McNamara, where he nearly breaks and he has to pull back very rapidly, and then it takes a totally different twist.
Yeah.
Why don't you tell us what
Absolutely, absolutely. He's telling this story about like some serviceman who got blown up, right? And he's in the hospital bed, and everyone's like, okay, this guy's probably gonna die. And his wife or something like that comes to Donald Rumsfeld and is like, I think he's gonna make it. And Rumsfeld like starts crying, as he's rehearsed a million times, I'm sure. And then like says, and then I came back the next week and tell you what, he made it. And it's just like, okay, first of all, that didn't happen. That did not happen at all. And it's like, even if it did happen, what about all the people who died? This makes no sense. So anyway, my point is just like, yeah, we can harp on the armed forces all we want, but it's like, if you actually care about the people in the army, you should want to rip this dude to shreds. It's like, just for that story, that clearly facetious, like how many other hospital beds did that dude visit where they just died? It's just like, makes you want to rip your hair out.
Yeah. I memean, if McNamara just reduced everybody to a number, like Rumsfeld is doing sort of the exact opposite of that to achieve exactly the same end. He's sort of like
100%.
taking this one miraculous moment to sort of like veil all the other sort of like horrendous tragedies.
Yeah. And all the other people who came back from Iraq and Afghanistan and were like, that was a fucking mistake.
Yeah.
Like Rumsfeld, wow, hate him now. Ugh. Yeah. Yeah, I'll be honest. I don't think there's anything redeeming about this guy. Call me crazy. But, like, whether or not he's the arch Machiavellian that I kind of think he is, whether or not he did all of these horrible things, doesn't really matter because he was, party to it all. Because at the very best, he's McNamara. And at the worst, it's like, whoa, he's just shy of Cheney, perhaps. I also like at one point how he called Cheney his personal secretary.
Yeah.
I was like, all right, that's kind of cool.
Yeah, because Cheney started out as his secretary when he was like a congressperson kind of thing.
Yeah. Ugh. Bad guy, folks. That's what I got to say. Have we missed anything about Rumsfeld? I mean, anything about his career?
I mean, there's certainly a lot more to this story that we didn't get from the documentary or things that were alluded at kind of thing. I was expecting we were going to get a lot more of the catastrophic failures that led to 9/11 happening.
Yeah.
And we also didn't get very much of how much he blundered I mean, you get some amount of the like post-invasion, the catastrophe that was the invasion of Iraq and how culpable he was. And when he does eventually get sacked in 2006, I thought it was, like, that is the cloud that's meant to be hanging over his sacking, is like how catastrophic his running of, or his prosecution of that war was, kind of thing. Or is that failure to prepare for post-Saddam Iraq? So I don't know. It's just you do get a lot, but you also feel like there's a lot more material to.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, to bring up 9/11 for a sec, just like the bit when Morris does confront him about that, and he's like, how did these dudes just do 9/11? That seems effing insane. Like, you expect us to believe that? And he's just like, things happen. Yeah. It's just like, what, dude? What? It's like, it's your job to make sure that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
It's just like,
and like he spends forever harping on about like Pearl Harbor and how that should have been, people should have seen it coming, kind of thing.
Which, like, there is evidence now that people did know it was going to happen, and it's like, you obviously know that. Like, oh my god.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, I don't think that's as good a metaphor as you think it is. Like, Rumsfeld, you bastard.
What do you think? Did you think there was anything to this little bit when, at the end, when Morris catches him out, where he sort of put in his words to him, and because you've got he's going over. Well, there's two things actually I wanted to about the known unknowns and the known knowns. Like, it opens with Errol Morris asking Donald Rumsfeld to read those
memos.
Read those memos about the known unknowns and the known knowns, and I was wondering whether it was all just like, if you met Donald Rumsfeld, you would try and get him to say those words. I wonder whether a lot of it was just Errol Morris like, I'm going to work out how to get him to say it one way or another. But then it ends with like, you've got your known knowns and your known your known knowns, your unknown knowns,
etc.
Yeah, etc. And then they add a fourth one, don't they? The unknown knowns.
Yeah.
Which Rumsfeld is meant to have intended things you think you know that you don't know. But Rumsfeld thinks that his original version of that is wrong, and Rumsfeld seems to think that like what he meant by that was, you know more than you think you do, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And Errol Morris is really trying to put him trying to cap off the whole narrative to the documentary with this idea that like what characterizes Rumsfeld's career or that whole period of American politics is like, you know less than you think you know.
Yeah.
But Rumsfeld is totally unwilling to recognize that re-characterization, so much so that he's willing to try and rewrite his own language to say that actually what he meant was that you know more than you think you know, not
Yeah.
that you know less than you think you know, kind of thing.
Yeah. No, I thought that was a good way of tying it up because, like, at the beginning, I think I said out loud, like, when he brings that up, I was like, oh, that's just another word for paranoia.
Yeah.
But then by the end of the movie, you realize that, no, it's not paranoia, and it's not what he's saying. It's just another way to justify whatever you want to justify. He's saying, oh, there's always information out there that will justify the means. You know, you have your end in mind, do whatever you want. You'll always be able to find information that justifies what you did. So it's not really paranoia at all. It's like he's just kind of a smart dude.
Yeah. You decide what you want to achieve.
Yeah, do it.
And
then be like, I don't know, what did happen in Baghdad? Crazy. Next question.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Yeah, just I guess to end kind of thing, like to reiterate, what's most sickening is the degree to which. Well, one of the many sickening things I don't know is the degree to which he was willing to just perpetuate this. We know that Iraq has weapons of mass destruction.
Yeah.
And when anybody asked for any amount of evidence, it was like, we don't need to give evidence because we know.
Yeah. He's like, I can't believe you would even ask me to do that.
Yeah.
He's like, why would I get up in the morning and, because he says something like, why would I look for potholes when I get up in the morning? And it's like, you're talking about evidence. You're not talking about potholes. You're talking about a way to justify the American people murdering 1 million people.
Yeah. That was like his favorite kind of piece of logic, which seems to be the most detestable. Is like whenever he's asked a question, he's like, why would I even think that far ahead? Yeah. Why would I even play out these thought experiments? Why would I even ask myself these questions?
Thoughts.
Yeah.
It's just like, oh, and then he does
at that
smile.
point he comes across as kind of a bit of a pickup artist grifter on YouTube. It's just like positive mental attitude, like don't think about the bad things, kind of thing. Just keep going.
Straight edge PMA.
Yeah. I don't know.
I don't know. Again, though, just to reiterate, these people will keep popping up while they have the opportunity to pop up in systems that they have the opportunity to pop up in. It isn't like he just appeared out of nowhere and was able to do the Iraq war and do Afghanistan because there was someone as evil as him. Mm-hmm. People like that are just still going to keep popping up while we have capitalism.
Yeah. If one were naive, one might think that Iraq happened because people had forgotten Vietnam. But not only had people not forgotten Vietnam, but people were involved in Iraq who were literally involved in Vietnam.
That's the thing. People remembered it perfectly. And they were like, we made some money during Vietnam, baby. Let's make even more money in Iraq. Wasn't there that bit where there was like the original memo where he was like, might have even been pre 9/11, where he was like, we're going to have to deal with, I know maybe it was after 9/11.
No, I think it was pre. It was pre. There was a lot of like anti-Saddam memos that came even before.
Well, it said something like, we're going to have to deal with Afghanistan and get the Taliban out. And maybe with terrorism in one or two other countries. I was kind of like, I wonder what the second country they were thinking was. Probably Pakistan, honestly.
It was funny because the memo, the way I wrote it down because I was like, I thought it was quite funny. It kind of read in a way where it sounded a bit like the way he phrased it. We mentioned Afghanistan, and then he mentioned and 2 other states that support terrorism. What he meant to say was we need to install some favorable governments in states that support terrorism. But it kind of sounded like what he was actually saying was we need to construct a few states that support terrorism, which is actually what happened.
Yeah, exactly.
They've created far more like terrorist-friendly countries than existed before they made any intervention in the region, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Not that they hadn't been making interventions in the region so long as those borders have existed and that region has been described by. I don't know.
I mean, he used the word terrorist at one point in a way that almost implied he meant not just like people actively involved in like, talk about getting an effing dictionary definition, but like people involved in like acts of terror to like further a political point or something like that. He almost used it as like anybody fighting against us as like guerrilla groups, but also, or insurgents, but also like anybody at home who's kind of like not down with this. Because he said something like, wow, the terrorists, they wouldn't want us to invade Iraq. And it was like, all right. It's like, whoa. Yeah, my point there is the Iraq War was bad.
You will get no complaint from me.
Thank God, Dan, can I just say, thank God we have a president in the United States now who is actively opposed to the war in Iraq and who, wait a minute.
Definitely voted against it.
I'm just getting this in on the newswire. Joe Biden was like the liberal being like, hey, Democrats, vote for war in Iraq. Oh, odd. Weird. Weird how that happens.
Yeah.
Ugh. Uncle Joe. What are you going to do?
Yeah. It's a shame that his brain is deteriorating because we'll never get an interview like these ones.
That's true. That's true. Yeah, what would that be? Yeah. Oh my God. Part of me is always very angry that all of these people live very long lives and die of old age. But then you see that, like, well, maybe their lives will end like George H.W. Bush. Did you ever see the video of him, quote unquote, throwing out the first pitch for the Houston Astros?
No.
Which, side note, of course he's throwing it out for the Houston Astros, the most despicable team in all of sports. But it's pretty funny because, like, he's near the end of his life at that point and he's just in a wheelchair and he's like can't move at all and they say his name. And, like, his arm just shoots up with the baseball, and it's like, did someone just shock him to get him to, like, move his arm up? Anyway, he's, like, decaying on camera, and it's like, if that has to be the end of this person's life, this despicable person's life, so be it.
Yeah.
Decaying on camera.
Yeah. Yeah. Lest anybody think that Jack is mocking or otherwise, like treating with ill favor somebody who was clearly suffering, like, we'll get onto it, I'm sure, but if there are any characters that deserve to suffer, it's many generations of the Bush family.
It's all of them. Who are the Bush kids these days? I don't think they're as Machiavellian as their forebearers, but yeah, there were some bad ones. There were some bad ones, folks, and they go a long way back. We'll talk about that later. I don't know. I'm disgusted. I'm disgusted by all of these people, and it's the same people. And oddly enough, weird how he was never elected. Damn. Democracy crazy, isn't it?
Well, we've gone on.
Yeah, I'm angry. I have nothing else to say. If these people don't make you mad enough to want to just completely change everything, come on. Come on. Watch it again. Like, these are pretty bad people, and they're all still around. You know what I mean? If it's not Rumsfeld actually being around, it's somebody like Rumsfeld. They're all still around.
Yeah, not only do we live in a system that allows the same character trait to keep coming up over and over again, we live in a system that allows the same literal characters to come up over and over again. Yeah. Long careers of evil doing.
Yeah. Ugh.
Yeah.
Yeah. It made me kind of rethink the Mike Davis. I always do that.
I know, two excellent mics.
Mics. Yeah. The Mike Davis about Reagan kind of being elected as like this Sunbelt bourgeoisie guy, which like he definitely was. But like it also made me think like, oh, there was also a little bit of like these guys, like there wasn't a lot of a power analysis in like guys like Rumsfeld and Cheney and all of these power players like supporting someone like him. Mm-hmm. Although maybe it was like, I guess they were probably the connection to money. And they were like, hey, let us keep bombing whoever and, you know, defense industry, whatever, do your thing. Sunbelt bourgeoisie, New England bourgeoisie, it's all the same to me. I don't know.
On that happy note.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't have anything else to say. Dan, enjoy your holiday that took place in the past.
I did. Well.
Oh, good to hear. All right. Well, we'll be back with more of something. Yeah. We'll be finishing the Fundamental Principles book soon. We're only going to do 3 parts on that, I believe, in theory. Yeah. Only that. So that'll be done soon. And yeah, I guess that's it. My name's been Jack. Dan, take us out.
My name's been Dan. Thanks everybody for listening. It's been a pleasure as always. Thank you, Jack.
Thank you, Dan. We'll see everybody next time.
Bye-bye.
The music you heard this episode was Music to Kill Bad People To by King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard. If you like this song, you can check it out and much, much more on their Bandcamp at kinggizzard.bandcamp.com. Be sure and follow us up on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And if you like what you heard, be sure and tune in next week for some more commie discussion. Till next time.